product managers should be iterating on their relationships. Again, I mentioned before that product managers are themselves products and our users are our colleagues. And so we need to get that feedback from our colleagues to better understand what are the pains that I've successfully solved for you and what are the things that still aren't working, right? And so what we want to do is we want to schedule recurring one-on-ones with key stakeholders so that way we can talk through what are the things that we can jointly improve on, right? It's not always going to be, hey, Clement, you need to change, but it's an open dialogue for the two of us to share what are ways in which we can maximize the effectiveness of our teams together. Something that you don't want to do in these feedback loops is you don't want to go in and give a project update. A project update where, how is your initiative doing, et cetera. There's a time and place for that, right? You might want to share that in weekly emails, or you might want to share that in broader team meetings. It's not a really good use of time to use this dedicated one-on-one time for relationship building to just give kind of a very shallow project update. Like you want to dive deeper into what are our working processes? What are the pains that are going unresolved so that way we can solve the issue for our users who are our colleagues. And again, we want to jointly commit to improvements. It's not something where it's unilaterally all their fault or all our fault. It's more, how do we use our limited resources together, our limited time together to create an improvement for the next time before we meet again, right? And unlike the one-time user interviews that I mentioned up front, these recurring feedback loops are meant to last for lots of months at a time, right? We want to make sure that we're continuing to build on that relationship. And so it doesn't really make sense to have a feedback loop in place until you've got that initial user interview, right? You have that deep dive of what are their needs, what are their pains, what are the processes. But at the same time, it doesn't make sense to have just those deep dives and then never follow up on it. You really want to make sure that you're getting that feedback loop back so that way you're optimizing your working processes to lead that team to success and to understand what are the things in which we can be doing together to make this come to life. Another thing to keep in mind is that a winning cross-functional team has really clear roles for each of the different teammates to play. And not only should each teammate have a clear role, we should trust them to deliver, right? We shouldn't be micromanaging them. We shouldn't be doubting their ability to succeed. We want them to be empowered. And so ways in which we can move a team into this more trusted, empowered position. First, make sure that you clarify the responsibilities that each person is playing, right? So as an example, let's say that we are thinking through how are you going to be positioning your product on the landing page of your website, right? Well, whose responsibility is that? Is that sales? Is that marketing? Is that business development? Or is that product, right? If you don't clarify that, then it's very hard for people to know I'm the one who's on point. It's very hard for them to step up to the plate and say, I'm going to go get this done, because they'll think, well, that other person also owns it, right? So maybe they're already doing it and I don't want to just take their work. I don't want to make them feel bad. So you want to make sure that it's really clear that for each responsibility, there's only one owner for it, one department for it, so that way people know what is that they should be doing and things that they shouldn't be doing, right? And kind of similar to that, not only should each department know the things that they should be doing, they should also have a general understanding of the things that they don't need to do, right? So as an example, if you're working with your customer support team and you're trying to understand, well, how do we make sure that our users are succeeding on a newly launched product, right? What's in scope is for us to understand what does the customer escalation process look like. But what's not in scope is you shouldn't make your customer support team make engineering decisions of how quickly we can get this thing fixed or how are we going to solve the problem from an engineering perspective. You shouldn't be making them kind of do QA work, right? You shouldn't be telling them, oh, well, go test this product to see if it works or not, because that's QA's job. So make sure that it's really clear who should be owning what when it comes to clarifying these responsibilities. Then another thing that we want to make sure that we do is once it's clear for this particular person from this particular function, here are the things that you're in charge of, here are the things that you're not in charge of. You want to invite them to commit to action items, to commit to responsibilities. You don't want to force them to do it. Because imagine I am working with someone from, let's say, account management, right? Or customer success. And something that has been problematic over time is, let's say that I see a lot from account management that, oh, well, we've committed to this customer that this particular feature that was never on the roadmap is now on the roadmap because we don't want to lose this customer. We want to let them know that, hey, product is in charge of deciding what goes on the roadmap or not. Right. And when you go and take that responsibility from me, it causes issues, not just for your customer because we're going to let them down, but also for all of your other customers because we're going to let them down trying to chase all these different things that don't make sense across the customer base. Let me take charge in terms of owning the responsibilities, right? You don't want to tell them, hey, I need you to invite me to every single customer meeting because I don't trust you, right? That's not the right way to do it. Instead, what you want to do is you want to invite them to say, hey, what are ways in which we can work together so that way, before you feel pressured to have to commit something on a roadmap, right, you check in with me first. Like, what are ways that you would be comfortable with, right? You want to invite them into that responsibility instead of forcing them into that responsibility. Because when you force people to do things, they're going to be really mad about it. And they're also not really going to do it. Like, they're not going to understand why it's so important to do. Whereas when you invite them to take on a responsibility, then they'll say, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm the one who said that I was going to go do it. I'm the one who agreed to it. And so of course I'm going to make sure that it happens. So in terms of making sure that you have that accountability across your team, you want to make sure that you're inviting people into their responsibilities and making sure that they know what it is that they've committed to. Then, what happens if the ball gets dropped? Well, to be fair, all of us drop balls all the time. As a product manager, I've dropped the ball a couple of times too. And there's nothing wrong with dropping the ball as long as we know how to deal with the problem when it comes up, right? So there's something that I like to call compassionate escalation, where instead of threatening people with, I'm going to go talk to your boss, right? Because I want to punish you for messing up, right? That's not what we want to do. We want to work with them first. We want to work with that individual to see what are things in which we could have done better as a team to make sure that you didn't feel like you were going to drop the ball. And then if there are issues, working compassionately with them and their manager to make sure that they're set up to succeed, whether it's taking on your initiative or not. So in terms of what compassionate escalation might look like, and this could very easily be its own deep dive session, kind of the 3 key touch points of compassionate escalation. The first time the ball gets dropped, you want to check in with that person and say, hey, did you realize that you dropped the ball here? Here's the downstream negative impact that happened when you dropped the ball. What are your plans of fixing dropping the ball? What are ways in which I can help you not drop the ball? Right. So that's kind of that first time when they mess up. And it's okay for everyone to mess up once because we all make mistakes. We're all busy. We've all got lots of responsibilities. That's okay. If it happens again a second time, right, you want to check in with them and say, hey, last time we talked about this thing, right? And you committed to me that you were going to make an improvement. I'm not seeing that improvement. What are you going to be doing differently next time, right? And so give them that second chance, but let them know that if it happens again, you're going to need to go chat with their manager to figure out how to make sure that this thing doesn't happen again. The third time it comes up, then you want to loop in their manager and say, hey, this thing is really important to have done on my project. And if I don't have this person's involvement, we can't get this thing done. What are things that you can move off of their plate? What are the non-urgent responsibilities for making sure that they can prioritize their time with me? And if their manager can help them succeed, then great. And if not, then that is something that the 3 of you can go talk through in terms of, well, should someone else own this responsibility instead? Or is it really their responsibility and they just need to be better at managing their time? And so in terms of compassionate escalation, we don't want to blame people for dropping the ball. We want to be empathetic and understand what are the things that caused you to not be able to do it? How can we prevent those things from happening again? And that then helps us to drive that accountability so that everyone knows that if mistakes happen, this is the 3-step process that happens each time there's a mistake. And of course, we don't want to just be the ones dishing out all of these judgments. We want others to hold us accountable too, because accountability is a 2-way street, right? We can't hold others accountable unless others can hold us accountable. And so we want to invite them to do the same thing. They should tell us when we dropped the ball. They should tell us when we made their lives harder, when we did things that they didn't expect, when we didn't do things that they did expect, right? So that way we're continuing to build that team up together. And to that point, we want to make sure that we're setting consistently high standards for ourselves and others so that way the team is moving forward and constantly growing over time. The final key to making sure that cross-functional teams are set up for success is to decentralize knowledge. So something that I see happen all of the time in product, unfortunately, is that the product manager winds up being the sole controller of information. Kind of all of the information is in the product manager's head in terms of, well, here's the different things that we learned from customer research. Here's what we learned from A/B testing. Here's our understanding of this customer versus that customer, right? And the problem with the product manager being the bottleneck here is that it makes your life difficult. You have to go talk to everyone to get them that information that they need, or they'll make decisions that don't make sense because they don't have the context that you do. We want to remember that each person on our cross-functional teams they're a subject matter expert in their own right. We should treat them as such. We should trust them to lead. So instead of trying to micromanage them or to give them drips of information, we should make sure that they have the same access to information that we do. We should be giving context instead of giving orders, so that we can delegate decision-making to them so that they can succeed and that we're not the blocker. We're not kind of that critical path choke point or bottleneck that causes everyone to slow down. And so things that I found to work really well in terms of giving context to people across all of my teams, again, whether that's business development or legal compliance or information security or marketing or sales, right? First, let's push information to them, right? So in terms of pushing information to them, something that I found to be particularly valuable is a weekly team-wide broadcast, right? Where we talk about, hey, here are the great things that we did this week. Here's the progress that we made. And here are some of the things that we just didn't do a good job of this week. Here are some of our failures. Here's what we learned this week from our wins and our failures. And here's the next steps. Here are the things that we're going to be doing next week. Right? By giving this information to others, by pushing it to them, they can then better understand, oh, okay, here's where the product currently is, and here's how my upcoming work is going to be fitting into the upcoming trajectory of the product manager, right? So by pushing that information to them, they can make sure that they've oriented their plans around your needs and the things that you're trying to get done. And then in terms of pulling information, right, you should be sharing a repository with folks so that way, anytime they're looking for information, they don't need to ask you for it. They can just grab it from that centralized repository, right? We call it pull because if they need something, they can come over and pull that information over. Whereas in terms of push, you're the one who's sending out the emails to them, right? So in terms of pull information, things that are super, super helpful for everyone to know about. Centralizing your product specs so that folks know what is it that the product is supposed to do and what is it that the product is not supposed to do. Super valuable, whether you're on sales or marketing or biz dev or what have you. User interviews, also super valuable for anyone on the team to have. Analytics dashboards, also super helpful. Any sort of sales and marketing collateral that other people can leverage, right? Or any sort of positioning, any sort of branding. You want to make sure that everyone's drawing from the same well of knowledge so that way everyone's making the best decisions that they can using that shared context.